Hi, everybody. I think we're live. Hopefully, you can hear me. Wait to see if there's a little action in the chat box here. There are definitely people on, and it says we're live. So that's all. Those are all good signs. Anyone comment? Give me a thumbs up or something that you hear me, just so I know you can hear me, or maybe just say you can't. Oh, we can't hear you. All right, so welcome everybody. I am Rachel Larimore. I'm the founder and owner of Samara Early Learning, which is a private consulting company that focuses on helping early childhood educators integrate nature in more frequent and meaningful ways. So that's who I am. Yay, there's activity in the chat box. Those are all great things. So we're on it. So I am coming to you from my backyard, socially distancing from my dog inside and my neighbors beside me, and also trying to be outside a little bit because, of course, this is about outdoor activities with kids. So I had to try to do it outside. So hopefully there isn't too much background noise. I'm amazed at how much traffic there is on my road right now for being in Michigan, where we are supposed to be staying home and staying safe, which hopefully you are doing as well. But yeah, I'm in Michigan. We are obligated to show you when we're from Michigan where we live by showing you our hand. So this is the Lower Peninsula. Of course, we have the Upper Peninsula up here. I live right here in a little town called Midland. It's right in the middle of the state. And here, spring is still trying to spring. Hasn't quite sprung yet. We have buds that are trying to pop, tulips that are starting to come up. But I know for some of you, you are in much warmer spots than where I am right now. Thus, I'm all bundled up. But that's just how it goes. It's nice to be outside. So today, the focus is to talk about outdoor activities for kids to encourage learning through play. And obviously, during this global pandemic we're having, but also anytime. So we're in this moment now. So I'm focusing on what's happening right now and the realities we're in. But the big ideas that I'm going to share applicable anytime. As soon as this is all over, they will be applicable as well. So hopefully you're all staying safe and healthy during all of this. And that brings me to the big goals that I just want to remind everyone as we're thinking about how do we support children, parents, teachers during this process. Is I really see this, there's two goals for me in the stay home and stay safe. The first thing is to maintain our physical health, right? It's our own health. It's also protecting the health of others. And then the second thing is our emotional health. And it's our, dealing with the stress that we're facing and being realistic about that is really important. And so those for me are the two really big goals. And as I'm working with educators to think about how do we support families at home from a distance, the priority are those two things happening? And then everything else is a bonus. And what's really fabulous is that there are two things that are really successful in helping both our physical and emotional health. And that's the outdoors and that's play. And when we bring those two things together, even better, right? So that's what I want to focus on today is talk about how do we use the outdoors and the emotional restoration and calm that the outdoors brings, as well as the opportunities for play that the outdoors brings. How do we use that during this time? And what are some things we need to be thinking about? And I'm going to try to give you some specific activity ideas, but a lot of it is going to be, these are big things and we're going to let the children lead, right? Especially in early childhood. If we're really embracing play, it's going to be for them to take the lead and we're going to follow their efforts. So first, before I get into this, I just want to mention the outdoors isn't closed during all of our social distancing, physical distancing from each other and staying home. However, we do want to use the outdoors a little differently than we might normally, right? So, of course, when you're using those spaces, follow the social distancing guidelines, keeping at least 6 feet away, staying home if you're sick, all of those things. But you also want to stay close to home. We're not traveling to some park somewhere else. Also, you're going to want to check the rules for that particular location. If it isn't your own property, is it even open? A lot of parks have had to close, unfortunately, because there are people not adhering to some of those social distancing rules. So know about that. And then the other thing is, as you're using those spaces, we want to remember to minimize the risky play that we might normally have engaged in. If you've heard me talk before, you know I'm all about risky play, and think it's really valuable for young children, all children really. Um, but we might want to cut back a little bit on that. So maybe not tree climbing as much, and maybe doing a little more lower risk activities, simply because we don't want to continue to burden healthcare, right, with the other issues that they're obviously facing right now. So saying all of that, we know the outdoors for the most part is open. I also recognize that everyone has a different version of nature wherever they are. I'm really fortunate, and then this is my backyard, and I can be out here and have some space to myself. But I know there are a lot of people that are in more urban spaces, maybe in an apartment and have smaller amounts of outdoor access. But at the very least, we all can see it, right? And so there's still restorative benefits of even observing nature through a window from inside. We want to remember to do that as well. So I recognize that we're all in a different place, and I'm going to try to give you ideas along the way that are applicable no matter where you are. If you're in a really rural urban space or urban space, rural or urban. All right. So that being said, um, some big ideas. These are the big things that I think are really important when it comes to outdoor activities for kids, whether it's now or when you're back in school with your kids this fall, or when if you're a parent and enjoying the outdoors with your kids. The first thing is to just explore and discover. There is so much out there to see. And this is where the true wonder of the natural world comes out, is when we just explore and see what nature provides us. So we're gonna look up, look down, look at big things, small things, right? Sometimes we're gonna go fast. Kids want to move, but the beauty, I think, of the moment we're in right now is that we have the time. And so we can slow down and really look at the details. And actually, it's the details sometimes that are the most wondrous. Um, and so getting out there and exploring and digging in the dirt and poking at leaves and seeing what we see. So I have some different tools that I found in my house, because I figured, hey, we're all stuck in there. We're not going out shopping. So what do we have that we can get? Even containers for holding loose parts. So I know you're all familiar with the term probably of loose parts, but open-ended items that have multiple purposes can be used in different ways. They can be both human-made or natural. So some human natural parts, or sorry, some human loose parts. Oh, I haven't been talking to many people lately, so this is, me still talking to myself, but the words complicated. So some human made loose parts are containers, right? You can fit all sorts of different things in there. But then tools like spoons in your house, maybe not the best spoons you have. Don't use the great silver, but great for digging, great for collecting things, for carrying. If you don't want to use real spoons, plastic spoons work. Plastic cups. I have a whole container here of stuff. Plastic cups work, but then also forks for poking and digging and carrying. So imagine that kids are collecting soil, perhaps worms, if it's warm enough yet where you are and they're out and about. It may be that they're collecting leaves. So these were all just from my backyard in about 5 minutes. I grabbed all these different natural objects, right? And then to really stop and look and explore and discover. Like this leaf is really cool. You can almost see through it, right? You can see through there. Yeah. And so what happened there? And why is that? And we're not striving for a particular answer. If they don't know, if they give you some answer that just seems a little outlandish, that's okay, right? It's opportunities for conversation and wonder and discovery. So those are some natural loose parts. But then other things, human things that are great for play. Whisks are great. Don't use your best whisk, but they're great for making mud pies and so forth. And all of these things you can do inside. So if you wanted to make mud pies, potato mashers are great too for smushing all the mud down, sand and so forth. But you could bring that inside and make all sorts of mud creations indoors as well. I also just want to mention this isn't really natural activity, but these things are great for art and painting and so forth. Which brings me to my next big idea. So we're out exploring and discovering. The next thing is also to use the natural world as inspiration for creating. So that could be things outside, like building, turn to some of that great, truly developmentally appropriate play where we get out the blankets and the sheets and the pillows and we make a fort. Whether, and by the way, this is another loose part, it's a towel. But if I was three, it could also be a cape, right? Could be all sorts of different things. So everything counts as a loose part in many ways, as long as it's open ended, it has multiple possibilities. Um, so back to creating, building forts, creating art sculptures. So all sorts of different art can be done either, again, outside or bring those materials back inside. So I gathered some branches, for example, um, and more leaves, but these things could be created, put them together with Play-Doh and make all sorts of sculptures out of these natural materials along with some human-made loose parts. Um, Maybe also these become paintbrushes. Have you ever, I don't know if you've ever painted with, this is a white pine. You ever painted with white pine needles? Great fun. Kids probably most kids probably haven't, so hey, why not? It's an opportunity. But then also, as back to this exploring and discovering, to look at the details of how are these needles on there? What are the patterns that we're finding? And that's the other way to create. You could pull all of these little needles off and create a mosaic out of them. Again, this could be outside or inside, in the dirt, on a piece of paper with glue, lots of opportunities that way. The other thing is, as we're out exploring and discovering, that can become inspiration for creating stories. Maybe that's oral and we're just telling orally stories, or maybe they're stories that we write down. If they're pre-writers, right, they're emergent writers, that's okay. We can dictate their stories, right, so that we show that the print has meaning. So there's all sorts of different ways to do this and encourage the outdoor play, and encourage the creativity so that it's also developmentally appropriate along the way. Um, let's see. So creating, gosh, I'm just trying to think of all the other, oh, the discovery thing I forgot to mention. So this is one of those, this is a little, it's a stick with buds that you see are starting to open. And you may think, Rachel, why did you pick part of the tree off that was living? I didn't. In fact, none of these pieces that I picked were they living. We talk a lot in nature-based education about picking up things that are dead or down, dead and down. So these were all things on the ground, and this particular branch came off of a tree that had fallen this winter. And I was amazed that the buds were still opening because that tree has been down on the ground for several months. And so, anyway, I thought it was pretty cool that those buds were opening. And so, then that's another place where you can really notice. And so, in addition to creating, the next big idea, so this is our third sort of big concept, is to notice. Notice with all of our senses what is out there and around us. So that's, of course, seeing things and observing with our eyes, but it's also observing with our ears. What are we hearing, right? What are we smelling? So, in fact, as I picked this up, I noticed that this and the pine both had a really piney smell. I wish I could wish YouTube Live needs to have a sniff next. That's the next thing, right? The next level of technology. I'm like holding it for you to smell, but it smells great and piney fresh. Um, but right, all of our senses are ways to notice the world around us. Now, if we're outside, that's fairly straightforward, right? I can pick that up, I can touch it. If we're limited in our space, maybe as adults we could gather some of those materials, if we're worried about safety, or we could take the kids with us, if there's a space close to us. Again, and this is all about being smart with social distancing right now. But then we could take those things back inside as well. But we can also notice out the window. So even in the most urban spaces, if you're in an apartment building, we can still notice all that is happening in the natural world. And you may actually be amazed in those urban spaces because there's birds everywhere. And so, not just what are the birds, that's sort of interesting, right? To name them, it is to know who they are, what those particular birds are, but also how are they behaving? Are they there all day long or only certain times of the day? Are they up high on the buildings? Are they flying through the air? Are they on the ground? Are they in trees closer to the ground? Right. So, noticing how they're behaving. Are there other animals out? Are there squirrels? Birds interacting with the squirrels or other small mammals that may be out and about? What plants do we see? What is the weather? I was talking to folks in North Carolina. They were talking about how beautiful it is down there. It's like, oh, it's beautiful here, but it's a little colder and not as sunny. So noticing how things change over time, right? And I talked about this bud opening. So maybe there's a tree that you're watching over time throughout this process, and it becomes a way to sort of mark um, progress and looking forward to the future, which is also another connection back to supporting our emotional health, that things are moving forward and there is still hope and growth. And so keeping track of when the buds are opening perhaps might be something that you're noticing out the window. So think about those things and noticing in all of your senses. um, the other thing I want to mention is that we seem to be right now faced with a lot of technology and it's been great. We can stay connected. I can talk to you all right now from my backyard while we're social distancing, which is fairly amazing to me. But technology can be a helpful tool also in observing and noticing the natural world. So don't think of it as a barrier. Also, don't think of it just as immersed in technology, but as a tool to connect with the outdoor world. So maybe that's recording video with commentary so that the kids could almost create their own nature documentary, right? Like an Attenborough kind of documentary. Maybe they want to take photos. I talked about the buds changing over time. Maybe it's take a picture of that. Oh, I lost it. There we go. Maybe it's taking pictures once a day or every other day or however, whatever timeline you want, but then noticing it over time. Maybe then it's also taking photos of things we really like that then become inspiration for the creating we talked about. So I can draw about what we've seen. I can also use that for writing or creating stories. Um, maybe it's writing a poem, but those photos then can be inspirations later as well, not only as a way to document. So don't forget that technology is yet another tool that can be used in the exploring, creating, and noticing. And then the final thing I want to mention is the sort of fourth big idea is encourage. I really think as adults, there's a couple different ways we can encourage. First of all, I hear from a lot of people that kids don't like to play outside. They'd rather be on their devices. And that's just not true. Actually, once kids are encouraged to go out and play and truly just play, they much prefer that because there is interaction. It may be right now with you as opposed to their peers, right? But there's social interaction and there's creativity, and it also allows them to have some control. So they get to manage what's happening and what the rules are, because that's the essence of play. Peter Gray has a great article out on the five elements of play, and that is one of them, is that the players make up the rules. And so again, this helps contribute to their emotional health throughout this crisis that we're in right now. So encouraging them to get started. Once they get started, they'll probably manage it on their own. Most kids don't really need much more guidance than, hey, we're going to go play. Oh, okay. Right. And then they can take off from there. If you do find that kids are having a little harder time getting going, that's when we can use tools like scavenger hunts. Let's see how many different colors we can find when we're outside, or even, again, looking out the window. Do we see letter shapes? Can these sticks be made into different letters? Like a kid might say, well, that's kind of like an N. Or if I put something else here, it might be an E. Of course, if we're talking about really young children, they're most likely to notice the letters in their names, of course, right? So can we go find those? Maybe it's looking for numbers or shapes or patterns. So We talked about the way needles come off of here, and that's opposite versus alternate. Do they find places where there's swirls, where there's X's, or different shapes that they can find in the natural world? So some sort of scavenger hunt, sort of to prompt them to head out and explore. But then once they've gotten started, of course, let them take the lead. And if it becomes it's not about the scavenger hunt anymore, that's okay. In fact, that's probably best. Um, the other thing to think about in encouraging, so there's scavenger hunts, but another one that's sort of like a scavenger hunt is challenges. So you might come up with things that are uh, smaller than a dime. How many natural items can we find that are smaller than a dime, or bigger than, I don't know, a bread box or something like that? Oh, it says my connection is unstable. Hopefully that's coming back soon. The other thing I wanted to mention, measuring tools are great loose parts as well. So this is, again, came out of my closet, right? The tape measure that way. Then there's also the real big tape measure, but that's yet another way to discover and notice the world and explore. How big is that branch? How is it compared to other things? So that's yet another way to explore and encourage. And so there could be a tool like that. Can we find things that are longer than 10 feet? And so then they take the measuring tape out and look. So those are just prompts if they need some encouragement. And again, most of the time, once they're out and about and exploring, they won't need much prompt from you. They'll be all about it. So that was a quick rundown, a lot of stuff. Hopefully there's some ideas that you can use in this crazy world we're in right now, but also later. And remember that all of these loose parts, whether they're human-made or natural, are ways to go out and discover all of the amazing things that are around us. And for me, noticing the natural world and truly moments of wonder and awe have been incredibly grounding through this process. And we know that that's the case. I mean, research is very clear that outdoor time and play both are really beneficial to our physical and emotional health. And those are the two goals for this time. All of the other learning, the academic skills that come are great, but those are secondary, right? And if we take care of our physical and emotional health, all of those academic skills will come. But this kind of play is building those as well at the same time. So keep that in mind, that those are the goals. The academics will come. We will all be okay through this. And really now the focus is being playful, joyful, full of wonder and awe. And so that kids come out of this flourishing rather than feeling or having to recover from any sort of trauma after all of this, because it can be traumatic. And so our goal, if we do it right as adults, is that children will look back and say, wow, that social distancing was really fun, right? I mean, that would be what we hopefully hear them say years down the road, as opposed to being stressful. So remember, go out and explore, find the stick, look at the lichen, all the tiny little colors that are on there. So you can do a color search. Can we find yellow and blue and reds? And how many different colors can we find? And in Michigan, even in March, can we find all those colors when the flowers aren't out? When the obvious colors? We might have to look a little harder. Here's blue, by the way, on a piece of wood. So there you go. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there you go, on the inside of a piece of wood. So those are some ideas. I don't see any questions in the chat box. Stay healthy, stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of your children and your friends and family and so forth. And I have a website up for you with kind of what I've gone through and some other resources for more specific activities, if that's helpful for you, because sometimes, especially parents who don't do this all the time, right? Educators do this every day. So a little bit of prompt is all they need as well. But I do have a website up. It's Samara EL. So it's SAMARAEL.com/Kaplan. And I think we'll put it in the chat box for those of you that are here. So you'll get to see that. But it's SamaraEarlyLearning.com/Kaplan. And there will be sort of the key ideas I went through today and some links to other resources for you as well. There's also a link to a book that I wrote that was published by Griffin House, and part of, I think Kaplan carries it in their catalog, called Preschool Beyond Walls, for those of you that are early childhood educators looking to think about how do I bring more nature into my program, especially once we get back full time. So with that, have a great day. I'm going to go play, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.